There's a tension that lives in the body when you're trying to hold everything together, and the world keeps asking you to receive, not emotionally, practically. Help, support, resources you didn't plan to need. Today, I want to talk about allowing and why it's not passive, not weak, and not the same thing as giving up. In fact, it may be one of the most active practices of trust there is. When my husband became ill, I had to learn how to receive in ways I never had before. This was during COVID, which meant that even the usual forms of help were constrained. People couldn't drop by. Meals didn't circulate the way they might have. Care arrived through systems and screens, regulated, scheduled, often impersonal. And still, I had to let it in. I accepted financial support from my family, government assistance, disability benefits through David's work. I said yes to food deliveries, yes when someone quietly added a Netflix subscription so there would be something easy at the end of the day. I agreed to a monthly cleaner. I accepted help from the ALS Society and from provincial and regional health units that were stretched thin but still showing up. None of this felt natural to me. Before caregiving, I would have declined most of it. I was practiced at managing on my own, at keeping my life contained within what I could handle privately. Receiving felt like exposure, like obligation, like a loss of control. Caregiving dismantled that strategy. There were no heroic moments of surrender, no dramatic realization that help was beautiful or easy. What happened instead was quieter. I stopped refusing. I stopped explaining why I didn't need things. I stopped making myself smaller so I wouldn't take up resources that felt scarce or conditional. A friend once told me that caregiving would make me an expert in allowing. She was right, though not in the way I imagined. Allowing didn't feel like trust at first. It felt like compliance with reality. But slowly something became clear. Allowing is not passivity. It is not interfering when support is already trying to reach you. This is where many people get stuck, especially sensitive, capable, self-reliant people. Allowing is often confused with giving up, with waiting, with hoping something works out. And that's not what's happening here. Allowing comes after choice. Choosing says, this matters to me. I'm no longer pretending otherwise. Allowing says, I will not interfere in what comes next. That distinction is subtle, and it changes everything. Because once we choose, the impulse to control usually intensifies. We scan for signs that it's working. We manage the timeline. We supervise the process. And that supervision often feels responsible. But this is where things collapse. Allowing is the willingness to let movement occur without managing every step. Not because you don't care, but because control is no longer doing the work you think it is. During caregiving, I was doing everything that could be done. Advocating, coordinating, learning systems, making decisions. That was choice. That was responsibility. Allowing came later. Allowing meant not refusing help just because it didn't arrive in the form I would have preferred. It meant accepting support through institutions instead of intimacy, through policy instead of relationship. It meant not insisting that help look familiar in order to count as care. And most importantly, it meant not interpreting receiving as weakness. This is where allowing and trust overlap. Allowing requires two kinds of trust. First, that you don't have to orchestrate every condition for support to exist. Second, that receiving does not diminish you, obligate you, or put you in debt to the universe or anyone else. For many people, receiving has come with cost. Help had strings, support was conditional, refusal felt like integrity. Allowing asks for a different discernment. Is this actually harmful, or is it simply unfamiliar? Allowing doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It means not reflexively saying no to what could help just to preserve an identity of independence or control. This is why allow cannot come before choose. Without choice, allowing becomes wishful thinking. Without allowing, choice becomes effort, strain, and exhaustion. When both are present, something shifts. Attention softens, the field widens, you start to notice resources and openings that were always there, but invisible while your system was bracing. Allowing doesn't make life easy. It makes life responsive. Allowing doesn't require dramatic surrender. It begins small, letting yourself accept a favor without explaining, letting something be easier than expected, letting help arrive without immediately justifying it. You don't need to feel grateful. You don't need to feel worthy. You only need to stop pushing it away. Over time, trust builds, not because life becomes flawless, but because you learn you can stay present, even when you're not in control. You might sit with these questions, not to fix anything, just to notice. Where are you still bracing against receiving? What kinds of help feel hardest to accept even when they're offered freely? What support has already been present that you minimized or dismissed? Where might you be managing how support arrives instead of noticing what's already here? Allowing doesn't mean everything will work out exactly as hoped. It means you stop insisting you must manage it alone. If you've chosen, but receiving still feels fraught, this is the exact terrain I work with inside the manifestation method. Not through pressure, not through positivity, but through structure, pacing, and practices that help you soften without forcing yourself open. You don't need to push. You don't need to prove. You don't need to do this alone. Allowing is not giving up. It's learning how to stay present when life begins to meet you halfway. I'll see you next time.